Velkommen til podcastserien Nærdødsoplevelser og Livsfortællinger. En podcast, der undersøger grænselandet mellem denne verden og den næste. Mit navn er Paul Bridgewater. Welcome to the podcast series Near-Death Experiences and Life Stories, a podcast looking into the boundaries between this world and the next. My name is Paul Bridgewater. Med mig over en Zoom-forbindelse har jeg Rachel Goodwin. Rachel er en engelsk healer fra Roskilde, der arbejder med kanalisering. Og før vi går videre, må jeg hellere sige, at resten af podcasten bliver på engelsk. So, with me on Zoom is Rachel Goodwin. Rachel is a channel and energy healer who for many years now has been working as a channel for Ascended Master Sarah. Rachel teaches courses in healing with Sarah and the angels and is the author of Sarah's Little Book of Healing. This podcast will look into how Rachel met Sarah and will also dip into Rachel's book, Weaving the Strands of Sarayei. Sorry, I knew I'd get that wrong. Okay, from 2022. Okay, Rachel, so could you introduce yourself?
I can. So, yes, here we are. So I live in Denmark. I'm from the UK. I'm 53 years old now. And I work as an energy healer. I talk to Sarah, the daughter of Mary Magdalene, and Yeshua, which is, not something I tend to bring up casually in dinner conversations.
No.
but here it is. It's what I do, and I'm really happy to be talking to you about it today.
And now you've introduced her already as the daughter of Yeshua and Mary Magdalene. How did you get in contact with her? Who is she?
Well, I feel I have to go a few steps back and give a bit of background for that answer to, really give its fullness. So I was born in Deal in Kent, which is a very small town in the southeast of England. I had a very ordinary upbringing and was a very ordinary person. I did not have any belief in anything particularly spiritual. I tried going to church a bit, Church of England, and didn't really find much there for me. And just sort of went on having quite an ordinary life. I went to an all-girls grammar school. I went and worked in a bank. Then I joined the Air Force. I was in the intelligence service for a while, and just then went, I'm not sure I really agree with all of this, and left. And I went and trained as a psychiatric nurse, which I found very meaningful and loved very, very much. During that time, my mother died of cancer. And it was extremely tragic. She died unnecessarily, probably, because it was a misreported smear. And it should have been picked up like years before it did. And then by then it was too late, but it would have been quite treatable quite lightly. And that completely broke me open. The grief of it was really just so profound. But during that time, I realized that I could see and sense spirit.
Okay.
Which I had actually always been able to do.
Yeah.
I was brought up in a very skeptical family. And even now, within myself, I'm quite academic in some ways. Yeah. And I'm actually quite skeptical. So I have these two sides. I have this quite analytical, left side brain, and yet I have this extremely strong feeling sense. And the two of them have to try and sit together. So it was quite interesting for me working as a psychiatric nurse. Because there I was on the mental health wards working with people who were mentally ill, who were seeing and hearing and experiencing things that,
that in some senses resonated. Yeah.
And not real. So, yeah, but I mean, that's a whole other conversation. So, so my mum died. she told me before she died that I was a healer.
Mm-hmm.
And this was because she went to see someone who was a healer when she had cancer. She was in a lot of pain, and she found it really alleviated her back pain.
Yeah.
And at the time, I was a student nurse, and I was horrified when she told me she was seeing a healer. And I was up in London doing my nurse's training. I got straight on a train and went down to the coast, which is where
trying to sort things out.
where my mum lived. And I said to her, I want to meet this man. I want to meet him. And she went, okay. And he said, okay. So she was round there having healing, and I went round there.
Yeah.
And I knocked on the door, and there was this very pleasant looking guy. It reminds me a bit of you, actually, Paul, in a cardigan, very just like, very ordinary. You're like, oh, hello, come in.
Yeah.
And I can't remember. I must have talked to him. I can't actually remember it now because it's so many years ago. But I just remember leaving thinking, oh, well, that's all right then.
Yeah.
And it was him that said to my mum, she's a healer. Your daughter's got a healing ability. And she gave me this book on healing and said, because she was determined that I wouldn't end up like her. She'd had a very unhappy life, and she started feeding me kind of Louise Hay, You Can Heal Your Life, and Susan Jeffers. What was that one? I can't remember, but it was something about not being codependent, basically. And, I'd read these books and they were great. I'd be like, wow. Anyway, she'd give me this book on healing, and I was like, I just put it under the bed. It was too much for me. I was like, right, okay, mother, not
for now.
But in the end, I gave it back to her and said, look, it's just gathering dust under my bed, and and she did look really disappointed. And then some months after that, she died. And I could really feel her presence around. I mean, like so strongly. And I couldn't deny it because I really loved my mum, and I really missed her. So I couldn't sort of tell myself, oh, it's not real, like, which I'd been doing like all my life. Like, no, that's just ignore things. It's just me being crazy. I'm just imagining it. I couldn't do that. I couldn't do that this time because she meant too much for me. Plus, she'd been sort of having a spiritual awakening during her illness. And she had a book called the Book of it's the Tibetan Book of Living and Dying, I think it's called.
It's up here somewhere.
And she had these chapters underlined, and so I was reading it, especially because she'd underlined things just to like my mum was like looking at those things, and it just meant so much to me that she'd kind of touched the book, and I missed her so much. And then I got to this chapter where it said about helping someone who's died, like pass through the different stages, and there was prayers to read out. And I was like, I just really wanted to read these prayers, and I'm like, oh, I feel really stupid. No, come on, let's just read them. What harm is it going to do? So I read them out loud, and I could feel stuff happening. I could feel it doing stuff, and I'm like, wow, what's going on? What's going on? So anyway, cut a long story short, for 2 years, I had this feeling I should learn how to heal, and I ignored it. And then one day I was up visiting the north of England for a weekend away. I went into a crystal shop, and there was a book in there by a guy called David Furlong, I think it is. That was like a really good book about telling you about healing. I just thought, oh, I've got to buy it. So I bought this book. I went home and I practiced the exercises in it, and I found that I could just heal. It was just like I could just do it.
It's like riding a bike.
It was like totally, but like getting on a bike for the first time and finding you could go full speed. It was crazy. It was crazy, but it also was making me really, really happy. So I was like a clinical charge nurse at the time.
Yeah.
And I used to practice on the staff during the lunch breaks.
Yeah, yeah.
And then I thought, well, perhaps I should do this. But in the UK, you can't work without insurance. So you have to have some sort of training. So I had my Reiki initiations, which kind of just opened me up more. And then eventually I found I just couldn't work in psychiatric nursing anymore. I got too sensitive, and also there was too many ethical conflicts for me. And I realized that I was going to have to find another way of working with healing, and I left. But what basically happened was, like, from that opening, it just never stopped. Like, and it's still never stopped. Like today, that continual growth and that continual development has never stopped. And that's how I ended up channeling, because I find that spirit nag me.
Yeah.
Other people get beautiful messages. Maybe I would if I was open enough, but perhaps I'm not.
No.
Perhaps I'm too resistant to development, because I get nagged. And I had another 2 years of something on my shoulder going, learn to channel. And I really was like, no, it's not really, it was really not how I saw myself. And I suppose I still don't see myself as a sort of, in the way that I am, I'm just like me, I'm a normal person, and I happen to do these things as well. So
it was interesting in your book that you first discovered Sarah on Hawaii while you were doing a totally different ceremony, and I thought that was interesting that it was within one cultural / religious context that something else turns up. Could you tell me what happened?
Yeah. So I went to the Big Island on Hawaii, and one of the things I found as I worked more and more with energies was that I really tuned into land energies, and that's something that I work with a lot. So when I came back from Hawaii, I wanted to share these things that I found with other people, and I ran a number of it was like a 6-week class where we met every week, and I would bring in the energies of that place that I'd been to, all these beautiful sacred power places, and we would sit in that energy. I would give a teaching of whatever it was that wanted to be taught, and then I would do a channeling, and I would ask for one of the Hawaiian deities to come through, and it all went fine. And then on the last one, we were working with this energy at this place called Pu'uhonua o Honaunau, which is a place of refuge, a sanctuary. And when I opened up to channel, it was Sarah that came through, which really, really threw me, because I didn't actually believe in her.
No. Yeah.
But, when you channel, it's like you open up, like, words form themselves in my head, and then if you don't say them, nothing happens. So it was either like, well, either I say something or I just go, sorry, that's it for this week, I can't do a channeling. And I thought, but I was probably curious as well.
Yeah, who wouldn't be?
So I just wanted to see what would happen, I guess. And also the people there were quite nice. And I thought, well, if I fall flat on my face, I think they'll be all right. They won't be mean to me, So I channeled her, and she had this beautiful energy about love being the key. But that's one of the things that I say about Sarah, is she is a kind of a spiritual energy that's coming through for our world as it is now, and it's really global.
Yeah.
She's not stuck to one religion, she's not stuck to one country. She is what, like, in the New Age, we have this term called the New Earth. She is for the New Earth, which is sort of like where we are really hoping that humanity will go and develop in their consciousness and become, like, we develop together and become a higher level of consciousness. And, not everybody loves that in the New Age about, that I say that about Sarah. They want her to belong to, a Santa Maria de la Mer, which is, she has a beautiful like Black Madonna statue in the crypt in the church at Santa Maria de la Mer, which is in the Camargue in France, and she's actually the patron saint of the Romani people. And then so she has all these different myths and legends, but she also appears in different ways in different places around the world. And I love that about her. I love that she is like all things and nothing,
Yeah.
She's here with an energy and with a message.
Yeah.
And she's not like taking sides with anybody.
No, there were two. That was one of the things that struck me about your description of her, that she was sort of represented misfits, outcasts, but also in a sense was, or not just in a sense, but was the daughter or a daughter. I mean, you have Father, Son, Holy Ghost, and then you have Mother Mary, and you have Mary Magdalene. But there isn't really any slot there for a daughter, and it seems that she fits into that area without just being placed as daughter. I mean, she's much more than that. But that seemed to be her. I don't know whether I'm busy categorizing her, but that was something that I felt often Christianity has a space which isn't filled.
Yeah. And in the book, the Weaving the Strands of Sarayei, which I'll just hold up here.
Yeah.
I write about this daughter archetype, which is actually being kind of coined by a Danish Jungian psychoanalyst. And I can't remember her surname, which is, very typical of me, I'm afraid, but her name's Pia.
Pia Skoggerman.
That sounds very, very right. Yes,
Yep.
absolutely. And she actually talks about the emergence of the daughter archetype and points to popular films such as The Hunger Games, where we have Katniss being like, she's being female, she's in touch with her own emotions, but she's powerful and she's not having it.
No.
Yeah, and also The Whale Rider, that's another one. And Thomas told me about this, my husband, because he has trained also as a Jungian psychoanalyst. And I was just like, wow, that's so Sarah.
Yeah.
She totally holds that energy of like female empowerment. But she also represents both sides in a way, because if we think about like this idea that Jesus or Yeshua is her father and Mary Magdalene's her mother, there's this whole thing about the sacred marriage. So you have the divine masculine and the divine feminine coming together in oneness, which creates this third energy, which Sarah is the expression of. And within that oneness, there is still the divine masculine and the divine feminine, but it's balanced, So, and I really love that as well, because I think it's really time for, like, this is my personal opinion, for like us to move forward in our culture, in our society together. This isn't about men being the patriarchy or women being the matriarchy. Let's get rid of all of that.
Yeah.
Let's start something new where we're actually like side by side, because we really need each other. There's not one in front of the other. It's like we have to do this together if it's going to work.
One thing about a Jungian approach is that he wouldn't really say, is this real or not? He would say, does it work? The question would be, so, and one of the things that sort of the Dan Brown rabbit hole or whatever would try to insist that this is a actual physical meeting between Yeshua and Marie Magdalene, that and Sarah was their daughter. What are your thoughts about this, how shall we say, question about, does it have to be historical fact, or can it be more an expression of the collective unconscious, or does it matter?
Yeah, I mean, personally, I kind of take it on all levels.
Okay, yeah.
I find all of those things interesting. And so, I mean, the channelings that I share, yeah, they're kind of things that come through me in a way. And I don't particularly feel they are like of me, because I'm just not that wise. And my energy is not that high either.
No,
I mean, it's okay, it's all right, but it's not like up there like with Sarah's energy. But as a person, like like my felt experiences is like I've been to places and I was just like, oh my God, I really feel like she's been here. Like Glastonbury is one of those places. And like, I don't know, I can't prove that to anybody. And actually, yes, I don't need to. I don't, if it feels real to me, then I can kind of have that,
yeah.
And yeah, I mean, there are people who get really caught up in believing this or believing that. I'm not huge on belief, to be honest.
No.
I'm not huge on like believing things and then defending them.
No.
If I feel something is real to me, I feel something is real to me. And no one can really take that away.
No, no.
Because it's my
Yeah.
deeply felt sense. So yeah, I kind of go at it like that. And if people believe certain things and they want me to believe them, I'm like, well, I can't really, I can't get into it because that's somebody else's thing,
Well, that sort of fits what you say about Sarah being able to incarnate in various people, or perhaps not even people, but in nature. So it's not a question of was she that and that person, but more a question of who does she speak through, or who, what are her representatives, or who does she work with? There's also those interesting,
yeah. So that's it. I mean, like we can get a lot more sort of existential here, because I sort of view everything as energies, and so we are all energies. And so for me, Sarah is an archetypal force. Maybe, I might be using that more in a New Age way than a Jungian way, because we have sort of changed it a bit. And having a husband who's a Jungian psychoanalyst, he can get very like, but it means specifically this. I'm like, it's not how it's being used though. So, but so she holds a certain energy and is for me like a certain face of the divine. So that archetypal force she holds, it's not hers. She's a face for it, and it's the same with all of us, isn't it?
Yes,
I mean,
exactly.
this is my belief. We are all a divine spark. We are all part of God's mother, father, God, and all this sort of divinity we have. It's not our own personally.
No.
We're all part of the divine.
All the world's a stage, and each and we are. I can't remember the rest of it, but we're players on it. We are, now you're Rachel, now I'm Paul, but we are the divine spark.
Yeah. I'm the divine playing being Rachel for a while.
Yeah. Okay. Could she have a particular message for this podcast?
Oh, let me ask her. I won't channel. I'll just tune in and just see what she's got something to say today. She usually does. Yeah, so when I ask her that, I'm experiencing. So this is really interesting. There's different, I would say different reasons why she's here at the moment, at this particular point in humanity's evolution, as we can say. And one of them is, so many years ago, I went through a really horrible time in my life where I separated from my eldest son's father. And I really didn't want that to happen, even though it was me that initiated the breakup. I really wanted to be able to stay as a good sort of mother and partner and live a very ordinary life in Surrey. But actually I couldn't do that. And it was too much for me. And Sarah had kind of been in my life, I don't know, maybe 3 or 4 years at that point. And I would talk to her, and I had a painting of her. There's a lovely artist called Cheryl Yambrak Rose, who does a lot of paintings of the Magdalene and different sort of spiritual figures. And I asked her to do a painting of Sarah for me so that I had something to talk to. It wasn't just in my head. And I was very cross with Sarah at this time. I want my life to like be really nice, please. Can it stop being so awful and traumatic? But I would find that when I talked to her, she would put me back in my body. I was very, very upset. And as with many people, when they are traumatized or stressed or, in deep states of distress, we disassociate and we come out of our bodies. So one of Sarah's big things is about integration, because she holds this energy of oneness. She integrates us. So when we call on her, her presence comes in, she starts to bring us into wholeness. So there I am in this terrible state of distress, not coping. And every time I spoke to her, I would be put back into my body where I could feel all my feelings, which, yeah. But if I stayed in a dissociated state all the time, that was worse. That's really, really bad for us when we do that. That's where you can just start going really, your mental health just goes downhill. All the time you are feeling your feelings, you have a chance to express them, release them, like process them, and also receive the things that you need in order to cope, which is, the whole thing about religion, I would say. So that's a big thing. That's a big message that she has, is that we need to be in our bodies.
We need to be in our bodies. Oh dear.
Because so many people are not in their bodies. And I would say the younger generations are doing better. I hear a conversation quite a lot in Denmark about how the young people are all having nervous breakdowns. Obviously, that's a generalization and not true for everybody. And I can't talk so much about the UK because I don't live there anymore. But I don't think things are getting worse. I don't believe that people's mental health are deteriorating. I think they're repressing less. And you can't get better until you start to feel what's in your bodies. And they're feeling what in our society is really, really unhealthy and dysfunctional. Then there's a chance for it to be kind of made better. So on a very sort of, that seems like really, really simple thing to say. Oh, Sarah's here to integrate, help us integrate and be this presence that brings us into wholeness. But actually, it's that one thing, it's huge. It's absolutely, it's absolutely huge. And that was the thing that she sort of brought to me to say, like, right now, about a message for us.
Well, it seems very relevant. So that's good. I could already feel my shoulder. So Mm. But okay, in your book, Weaving the Strands of Sarayei,
Sorry,
I did it again. Sarayei, you use the image of weaving to illustrate various aspects of Sarah.
yeah,
Okay, could you
yeah,
explain? And there are lots of strands. There's a red strand and a silver strand, and
yeah.
anyway, could you say more about that?
When I wanted to create this book, it was so that I could bring together quite a lot of different strands of Sarah. And at the same time, I was studying, I did a 2-year training in Sweden about Nordic shamanism. So this is kind of working with the myths and legends and cosmology of the Old Norse. And one of the things I came across was the Norns.
Yeah, yeah.
And the Norns are the mistresses of the weave, which you could kind of see as like everything that is in existence, but that's seen as this kind of web.
Yeah.
And they keep everything balanced, and they make sure that, you know, that weave is kind of working. And as I looked more into this, weaving is something that women used to do and would spend quite a lot of time doing. And there's actually quite a few different sort of magical things and spiritual things all to do with weaving. And I just really, really loved it. And I could see Sarah in that as well. So Nordic shamanism, I'll just briefly talk about this, is called, one of the names it's called in modern day is Seither. It's spelled S-E-I, and it has that blue day, that softy, and an R. And it was a lot more about women than people realise, because you know, in all the prose Edda and everything, there's a lot of stuff about Odin, but I mean, Odin was the god of the poets. And once you start to look into it a bit more deeply, there's lots of clues there about all sorts of women's stuff. So I got a bit obsessed with this idea of like weaving and women coming together, and they would be there doing all their weaving stuff, and you can sort of fall into a slight state of trance when you're doing this kind of work, where, you know, a bit of magic can kind of happen. And they would weave spells, they would tell the future. And I would say this is a strong message of the book. I'm not sure how sort of obviously it's there, or if it's a bit more covert, but all of these things, I would say, are a natural part of humanity. To do energy healing, to sense what is going on, what's coming ahead, to be able to affect things. And that's what Sarayei actually is. It's the art of taking the destiny that you have, that you've been born into, and making the best of it. And, you know, in New Age speak, I would say that is like taking the darkness and bringing the light into it, and like holding them together in oneness. I can't remember what you asked me now.
No, it was about weaving. What the image of weaving was about. Does it and does it also have something to do with your focus on landscape? Is there a connection between, I think you call it the ascension grid or something like that?
Yeah.
And the idea, I mean, I don't know, perhaps it's just me spouting on. I mean, getting, you have the cloth or whatever, but a cloth is like a map.
Yeah, so like
it's
if we
also
go
like
back
a grid, but
if we go back to that image of weaving, in the New Age, people call themselves light workers. That's one of the terms. And, you know, some people get a bit like, well, what about shadow workers? And what about, but I mean, let's just go with light workers for the moment. And you can have this image of like bringing down the light of the divine and weaving it down into reality. And we can do that because we're here physically, and we do that in co-creation with all of the realms of the divine. So the angels and the nature spirits and so on and so forth. And we're doing that into our own bodies. And yeah, we're also doing it into the land. So our bodies are made of the earth, which is the land. We're actually made out of the same stuff, and the same kind of processes need to happen. So, you know, this is a belief of the new age, is that we are orchestrating a new way of being, and that takes a certain amount of effort and energy. And that is, you know, a lot of the work that we're doing. And so far, I would say people have been very, very focused on themselves and like the me and the I, and, you know, and that's fine because there is a lot of healing to do individually. But for me now, the next step is we also need to work with the earth. And that is because I would say we've had a certain amount of thousands of years on the earth where things have been quite challenging. There are a lot of, I have to say, negative energies. It's not the right word, but I don't have a better one, because of things that we've done, things that we felt and thought and believed, and they need clearing up. And so that is part of, so I'm going to Glastonbury in a couple of weeks with a group of people. We'll be doing some of that work there, because if you do this sort of work at sacred power places, it sort of sends them out to the globe, basically. Yeah.
And I think you mentioned working with Sarah's flame for doing, or she has an image of the earth being enveloped in this cleansing flame.
Yeah, which sounds a bit like Armageddon or something, doesn't
Okay.
it?
Well, going all the way out there.
Or round a rock or something.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I mean, like, even if you look at Round a Rock or Ragnarok, there is mention, not a lot, but you can find it in snippets here and there. There is this idea that that a new world gets recreated, and it's actually Eden, or Ethan, the Norse goddess with the apples. She's the one there, sort of like with all her benches in a field of wells, which sounds a lot like Roskilde to me.
Yeah.
Choosing all the people that are going to be in this kind of new earth, and it's the sun's daughter who is the new sun.
All sorts of how should we say, associations to I forget what they're called in English, the last days, and the people remaining on Earth, and goodness what has always frightened me to death. I always thought, okay, I'm going to be one of the ones left behind. So, but
that's it. But if you can see it more as like, we can like birth a new world, and that doesn't mean that everything that we are has to be destroyed. It's just getting transformed and reborn, just like, you know, trees die every year and then come back to life. And, you know, that's my sense. That's the process we're in. But I mean, that thing that you're talking about, like, you could call that like the ascension fire. And I've had an image of that being all the way around the earth. And that's the process that we're in at the moment. And you know, it might look like things are getting worse, but when you start a healing process, things do have to get worse before they get better. Because, like, you know, as I said, I tend to see everything in energy. Energetically, I can feel that the earth is much more in a much better place now than it was when I was a child. Like, when I look at it energetically now to like 1970s, like where I was being a little person, it's like it was much heavier then. I mean, that's you know how it looks to me.
It's more fluid. Yeah, I can see that. I think also then, I mean, the sense that of doom and judgment is very much Old Testament like, you know, and only the faithful will be saved. Whereas the image you're providing is much more we're all in it together and we're all working towards the common good.
Yeah, absolutely. And like in Hinduism, they have this belief of like an oversoul of humanity, and that is, so you have this huge soul that is humanity, and all of our souls come from that like one soul. So you can't have like just a section of it being separated. We're actually one soul.
Yeah, the sheep and the goats are still animals, if you're talking about separating the sheep and the goat. Okay. This perhaps leads us on to, what are your thoughts on established religion?
Well, yeah, that's I mean,
Being a
yeah,
good Christian healer myself,
yes,
churchgoer,
yes.
minister's son. Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, so I was brought up christened in the Church of England, which, you know, if I'm being really cynical, I say is no religion at all. Because like when I was a kid, they sort of denounced everything and were being so they intellectualized the crucifixion and everything. And I couldn't find any deeper meaning in it. And I studied religious studies at school. I actually chose to study religious studies, which in those days was just Christianity. We didn't get to study sort of anything else.
No, the true religion.
Yeah, and at some point I just thought, it isn't what I'm looking for.
No.
And I would go and sit in the church, and like, I couldn't even find any kind of spiritual energy. But I have to say, I do think that's particularly the church I was christened in, because I've been back since, because there are a lot of churches that have amazing energies in them. And I went back to this particular church I was christened in, and it was just nothing. Like, I could have been in the supermarket. So, you know, I won't say that all churches don't have spiritual energy, because that's really, really not true at all. But for me, I needed to like look elsewhere. But I was quite happy being an atheist, to be honest. My dad was an atheist. My mum was a lapsed Catholic. She gave up her religion when her husband died, when she was pregnant with my sister. She just went, that's it. I've had enough now of God. So I was brought up with like really no religion at all. But yeah, it was that thing for me, like when my mum died and I started seeing and sensing spirit, that is when I opened up to spirituality. I mean, organized religion, it doesn't work for me because I have to find my own truth, you know. But I really love religions per se. I'm really, really interested. I find so much gold in, you know, what has been written in Sanskrit and Hebrew and Hawaiian and, you know, all of these different cultures. And I kind of feel like they all belong to me, but I'm none of them.
Yeah.
I don't like that sort of thing about dogma.
No.
Where this is how it is and you have to believe. I started going, oh God, no, stop. You know, I am totally allergic to that.
So people say,
But you know, you can't say that all organized religions are like that, because of course they're not. And going back to what I was saying earlier about, you know, like when we're stressed and traumatized, we come out of our bodies. When we come back into our bodies, we need someone to help us, and we need something really outside of ourselves. Like with the AA, with the Alcoholics Anonymous, they're praying to a higher power. Honestly, it doesn't really matter what that higher power is. I don't think, as long as you are actually calling on it, because you need to ask for help to get it. You know,
and there needs to be someone to tell the stories, I guess. That's what I say to myself at any rate when I get disillusioned with organized religion, is that without it, then it's very difficult to have a coherent storyline of various traditions. But that's just my take on it.
Yeah. And I think people, people need that spiritual help, and not everybody's like me. Not everyone is a spiritual adventure seeker wanting to like find out the truth. And, that's kind of like my life purpose in a way. They've got other things to be getting on with, and, they just like maybe need to have a church to go and sit in and get some like, spiritual goodness.
Okay, so for those who want to learn more about Sarah, where could they go? What could they do?
Well, I mean, one of the reasons why I started writing books and doing a website and going on YouTube and everything is because I couldn't find anything out there about Sarah. She definitely existed as a myth and a legend, but there was no sort of reference points to really find out anything more. So I have a website, rachelgoodwin.dk, because I'm in Denmark. And that has a lot of things on there if you want to sort of, because I really embrace all of the different legends around Sarah and try and find out what other people are saying, although it's not that much really. But I have produced quite a few podcasts, YouTube videos. I've written 2 books. I have another 3 waiting to be written. Can't actually write them at the moment because I'm too busy having to prove to Danish immigration that I work 40 hours a week and earn money to get my citizenship. And I don't feel I can afford to just like not produce any income for 6 months while I write a book. So, but hopefully, if anybody wants to say any prayers for me, could you?
Yes.
Because I'm hoping that will be finished this week, and then it will be 9 years of torture going through the Danish immigration system and stress for my family, and that will be over. So any prayers for my life in Denmark, that would be very gratefully received. But YouTube, podcasts, and books that I've written.
Okay, and then a question for those who think that channeling is just beyond the pale. Do you have any good advice for people who, I suppose they wouldn't have listened to us for this long, but if they had listened to us for this long, do you have any good advice for those who think, okay, this is just New Age gone bananas?
Yeah, and I know people in the New Age who don't believe in channeling as well. And I mean, I was one of those people until I was, 26 and my mum died. And then I sort of like, and also like, if I couldn't experience, like, it's such a strong felt experience to me, I kind of go, all right, I'll just go with this. But not everybody has
No.
that. So in a way, I kind of feel a bit lucky, but it is very much part of the human experience to have a feeling about things or to feel called towards things. And if people are supposed to be, if it's part of their soul contract or their destiny to work with Sarah, they will feel called towards her. And the same with things like channeling. I mean, there's so many different ways out there of moving towards the divine.
Yeah.
You go with what you're interested in, because we're all so different, and there's a million different ways out there. So if you think channeling's a load of rubbish, I mean, that's fine. Do what you think is the thing. Yeah, absolutely. Because we're all going back to the divine. I mean, there's there's no 2 ways about it. So it doesn't really matter how you do it, to be honest.
No. Okay. Okay, I think I'll end off with part of a poem that you wrote at the end of the book on page 274 from this book, Weaving the Strands of, I'm not going to pronounce her name. Sarah.
Sarayei.
It's incredible, isn't it? Sarayei. Okay. It's the final stanza of a poem, which is called A Little Poem by Me, that is Rachel, to Sarah. And it ends off like this. So I don't care if you're real or imagined. I don't care if others say that my channelings are cheesy. Well, maybe a bit. It works. You work for me. Then there's a heart. Blessings to Sarah. Hooray. Amen. I think that's fantastic. I love the way it goes. Hooray, amen. It's sort of there's a sort of like an explosion, and then it lands on amen. So anyway, I enjoyed the poem, and I enjoyed the book, and I enjoyed the podcasts. So thank you a lot, Rachel. I look forward to seeing you live, and not just on Zoom. And for those who want to contact Rachel, I suggest you visit her website, and that's, as Rachel said, rachelgoodwin.dk. And for those who enjoyed this podcast, you can find this podcast and other podcasts. The easiest way to find them is actually on healinghelp.dk/blog. I'll say that again. It's healinghelp.dk/blog. And I hope to do more work in English in the future. Get to practice my English. We'll see. So thank you, Rachel.
Thank you. You're welcome. It's been lovely talking to you, and thank you for not asking me to speak in Danish.
Oh, I guess you're getting there. Okay.